everyone, or every Sabian 187 who might be here right now. I have decided to do a little bit something different this morning as I adjust my microphone. I've been in a creative slump for a while now, and I didn't take off the top. There we go. There, you can see me now. Or see what I was talking about instead of an FBI screen. Because my brain's still waking up, and what do I know? Live TV. So I decided to work on this again. Some of you may have seen this before. Maybe you haven't. I don't know. But either way, I haven't worked on this for a while. What is this that I'm referring to? This is a story I've been working on bit by bit for a while. It is a quasi-Lovecraftian, quasi-Solomon Kane type deal. And I've picked away at it a little bit since the last time I did this. And as you can tell by the top of the screen there, last edit was on July 24th. July 24th. Been a while. But given the season, given the fact that I haven't really done any writing of any note in a while, I got a little... been getting a little, creatively cabin feverish. I think that's how I've described it in the past. So, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do a reading of what I have so far to remind myself where I am in the story and also see if I can find some places that need improvement. And then, presumably, by the time I get to the end of what I've written so far, I will add to it to some degree. Whatever that degree is, we'll find out together because I'm not even sure. So this is not a commentary. There's not going to be a whole lot of that kind of thing. So no TEDx, and obviously this is on a different channel with the intention of indicating that this is a different kind of content. So if you like stories, if you like being read to, if you're looking for some cheap ASMR to lull you to sleep, this might be it. But I'll do my best. Anyway, let us begin. Now, I don't have a title for it yet. I just have chapter titles. But we'll start off with The Road to Dolbarrow. Fingers of midnight clouds clutched at the moon as Josiah Rhodes stumbled his way back towards his home near Dolbarrow. The night's debaucheries at the disreputable Chatham House had saturated both his mind and gait, an aesthetic achievement. An anesthetic achievement. See, I'm not, this is not professional, guys. This is not a professional audiobook. I apologize. An anesthetic achievement that had become a nightly staple good for such a tortured conscience. The pathway upon which he trotted was likewise besotted after a recent rain, and Rhodes's feet squelched erratically along the quagmire. Though his frame still held the shape of a military cadence, his fighting balance had long since surrendered. Just a mile further on, just a mile further on, he mumbled, a piteous mantra of encouragement against the languidness and slumber of his inebriated instincts. Somewhere beyond the haze of ale, a more conscientious soul bade remind him of obligations on the approaching morrow, but these pleas were quickly dismissed in favor of focused footing. Passing a thicket of the native oak, the moon was suddenly obscured, the pathway sent into pitch. Rote memory more than sight guided Rhodes into the darkness. But whatever clouds likewise modeled his mind were instantly frozen along with his progress as the night was pierced by a shout and the most inhuman of screams, and then the clashing of steel upon itself. Rhodes's gaze snapped towards the sound and into a nearby field, a clearing where the moonlight fell in full, illuminating two figures matching blades in a fight to the death. With the sort of reckless curiosity that only terror can fuel, Rhodes numbly stepped towards the scene in wonderment. The two combatants appeared thuswise. A stout and stocky man in fine clothing, trimmed in some material that caught the moonlight such that it shimmered like gossamer, who wielded a cutlass and, by his staggering, had already received more than one grievous wound. The other figure stood tall and sure, dressed in the garb of a Puritan, and whose face the moonlight revealed as gaunt and somber. But even in shaded light, Rhodes could see a determination in the Puritan's face that transcended any fear of death from this struggle. Drawing his rapier back, its blade already dripping with the blood of his foe, the Puritan dealt the killing strike, cleaving the gossamer man's heart in twain and sending a corpse to the ground where once staggered a man. Then there was silence. Oh, sorry. There was a silence then. A stillness that seemed to sweep across the field and into Rhodes's very soul. A stillness that was just as quickly shattered by that same monstrous cry Rhodes had heard but moments before, but now from just behind him. Ice water sped down Rhodes's spine as he wheeled around to see the most unnameable horror shambling towards him. It carried the shape of a man, but whose face was that of mottled wax, limbs like oily vines flecked with claws, and a fang-ridden maw that split once more into a sanity-shredding scream. Rhodes fell to his knees, his eyes as wide as saucers, but even so they were unable to accept the totality of the horror that was now about to be his last living vision. "Nay, foul abomination!" The shout, more a battle cry, stunted Rhodes's finality long enough for him to see the Puritan leap towards the thing, a rapier in one hand, a wheel-lock pistol in the other, and in motion so sure and fluid as to suggest a practiced predator, the blade found its mark through the thing's chest, while the pistol ignited in a flash of flame and thunder, leaving a smoking crater where once the monster's head had been. The thing's body quivered for an eternity of quickened heartbeats before collapsing into a heap of flesh and bone. Satisfied with his work, the Puritan cast his dimly lit brow down at Rhodes. "You are unhurt?" Rhodes nodded in time with the shivers that consumed his body. "Hold fast, then." The gaunt man sheathed his rapier, holstered the wheel-lock, and then withdrew a firm and vicious dagger from his belt. "I must see to it Let me try that again. I must see to it at such deviltry ends this night." And with that, the man stalked back into the field towards the fallen form of the gossamer man. Eyes still affixed to what remained of the monster, Josiah scrambled backwards with surpassing care, lest he rouse the beast somehow. But there was no movement from the husk, which seemed to be deflating ever further into the earth with each passing moment. Unsure of what to do, unsure of what to do, Josiah merely sat there in the dark and the mud. Presently the tall man returned, wiping fresh blood off the dagger's blade with fabric torn from the gossamer man's vestments. "Have you a home? I require shelter and rest." For the first time since the tumult began, Rhodes found words passing his lips. I do, sir. Just a mite down the path here." The tall man nodded, standing firm in an expectation that exuded command. Rhodes just nodded again, scrambled to his feet, and began hurriedly making his way homeward, the tall man pacing him with due purpose just behind. Rhodes's feet acted in kind, all inebriation having fled, along with his certainty of the world. Chapter 2. The House of Rhodes. Lamplight cast a forest of arching shadows within the front room of the small, modest home of Josiah Rhodes. Without exchanging words since arriving, Rhodes went about tending to a fire and preparing food and drink, while the Puritan perched upon a stool, divesting himself of his armaments and cloak. As Rhodes cautiously approached with a small plate of meat and a cup of bitter tea, the Puritan haltingly began to shed his doublet, and as he did so, Rhodes spied the stain of blood on the man's undershirt. "You're wounded," Rhodes said matter-of-factly, as he set the meal down on the small table aside the Puritan. "I will tend to it." The Puritan's eyes narrowed in a question, but he did not voice it, instead taking Rhodes' assured promise at face value and stripping his torso bare. Rhodes returned presently with a needle, thread, strips of cloth, and a small wine bottle, and was unsurprised to see that the stranger's chest was a veritable landscape of battle scars and other damage, of whose origins one would dare not imagine. But this latest atrocity had not gone too deeply, and Rhodes proceeded to clean, mend, and bandage the wound with the practiced care of knowledgeable repetition. For his part, the Puritan remained still and uttered not a sound as Rhodes did his work, save a question. "You've a name?" "I, Rhodes, sir, Josiah Rhodes." The Puritan did not bother with an introduction in kind, instead remaining as still as an oak. Once done and satisfied, Rhodes settled back into a chair opposite the man as the Puritan examined his handiwork. "You know well of wounds, then?" Rhodes nodded grimly. "Too well, I'd wager, sir." A long silence commenced then, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the Puritan's sipping of tea and chewing of meat. When the meal had finished, Rhodes moved to speak, but was cut short by his guest's preemption. "It were a necromancer," he intoned with authority, "one who I have tracked for some leagues. And for this and his past diabolics he now has damnation to warm him for all time. The beast you saw was only but the most recent aberration created by his magics." Rhodes had only a confounded countenance to offer in response. The Puritan's eyes focused towards an unseen distance, at times past, and horrors beheld, and old horrors beheld. Few either know of nor can contain in their minds such evils. The word stirred something in Rhodes, and he looked without forethought at the space just above the hearth. "I've known many an evil in my time, sir." The Puritan took the man's angle, spying the sword and scabbard of an officer hung there, its battle-worn blade glinting firelight. "Mayhaps you have." The Puritan turned back to Rhodes, assessing the man with his dark, impenetrable eyes. "Mayhaps they've the better of you, for you carry the stench of an alehouse and the form of one given to gluttony." Rhodes was dumbfounded by the insult, then angry indignation surged forth into his voice. "You dare, sir? In my own home? I'll sing your praises to my grave for your slaying that beast and its master, but you've no right to—" The Puritan leaned forward into the man's sentence. "A man of war and of healing, who cowers in the face of evil and drowns himself in swill? A man who hangs a blade in eyesight to remind how far from honor he descends day by day? In a world where the devil's corruption seeps into the very marrow of the lands he once bled for, how does he dwell at the bottom of a bottle?" The Puritan sneered in unveiled disgust. "As the Lord's righteous hammer, I do have the right to voice with precision the sight before me. But inasmuch as I am his weapon, so I might be his messenger. And in that correspondence, as he has seen fit to put you before me this night of all nights, will you cower now, seeing what you have seen, knowing what you do now know? Or will you slough off your self-sustained woe and raise that blade once more in courage against the darkness?" Rhodes stared at the Puritan as one might stare into an unfathomable abyss, the words of the righteous man reverberating through him like a frozen wind. Perhaps he had thought to dismiss the night's events as ale-induced fantasy upon the Puritan's departure, but it was made plain now, and it were not an abyss at which he stared, but at a crossroads. With uncertain eyes he looked again at his sword, and then to the small bottle of wine, and then finally to the Puritan. And Rhodes made his choice. Ooh! Woo! So righteous, so indignation. Anyway. Chapter 3, The Grim Harvest. They set out I can't even read my own words. They set out as the dawn's rays had only just broken on the horizon. See, here's part of the problem. It reads easier than it is. It reads in my mind easier than it is to read out loud because I'm sort of mimicking the kind of antiquated word choice and cadence of like a Lovecraftian thing or maybe a 1920s kind of deal. So when I read it with my eyes and not trying to say it out loud, it rolls off much better. Okay. They set out as the dawn's rays had only just broken the horizon, Rhodes still in a state of uncertainty, but now fueled by the revelations of the night's horrors that to do nothing in the wake of it was a far grander sin. The Puritan's words had affected him so, and now he followed the man as they began the trek the short miles to Dolbarrow, the long-forgotten weight of his sheathed sword tugging at his waist. "The necromancer did not arrive here by chance," the Puritan relayed. "When I caught my first whiff of him, he was sending agents to plunder the catacombs of Paris for the raw materials necessary for his heresy. In dispatching those agents, he was thus alerted to my pursuit and fled." "And so," Rhodes began cautiously, still trying to find his footing of reference, "he came here of all places for more materials?" "Aye, as evidenced by his most recent beast. But moreover, I believe, he must have had allies here from which to seek succor." Rhodes nearly blanched. "Here? In Dolbarrow? Sir, I do beg your pardon, but I've lived here the whole of my life, and know every family therein. Surely if there were a kind of witch or warlock, I could name ye a suspect, but there be none." The Puritan swung around to face Rhodes, his eyes narrowed to saber points. "The devil's minions come to thee garbed in smiles and pleasantries. Such corruptions run low and deep. And this place..." The Puritan looked about the tall and sturdy oaks, the wide and wild fields all bathed in the warming glow of sunrise. "This place is ancient and untouched by the chiseled edges of modernity, and thus so too are its secrets." He glanced back at Rhodes. "Mark me, one or more of your cherished neighbors are not what they appear." The Puritan returned to his determined marching, and only after the barest pause of doubt did Rhodes make effort to rejoin him. Blah. Let's put a break there. "And so, where would we start looking for such persons?" The Puritan snorted in sardonic humor. "We go to where one might find the constituent parts of such diabolism. Your hamlet possesses a cemetery, I presume?" The pathway eventually crested to an overlook, which presented to the passerby two possible visions. On the gray and grim days, the thatch of the small and hunched hovels would blend into the darkness of the earth and trees, painting a foreboding and unwelcoming expanse. Unwelcome? Foreboding and unwelcome expanse, okay. But in the rare, bright, and clear days such as this, the rolling green of the hills gave way to the warmth of straw-colored roofs and the gentle curls of smoke rising from each as villagers broke fast. And which of either is the mask over the truth? Rhodes was now forced to ponder this as his... Rhodes was now forced to ponder this as his grim companion, certainly not quelled in his fervent pursuit by the pleasant vista, stalked ever onward and down into the valley. Sprinting to keep a pace, Rhodes sought pause. "The cemetery is just past the rise over there, sir." Rhodes pointed towards a small gully that sat just beyond the edge of the village, huddled beneath a ring of the strong native oak and cordoned by a low fence. Even from their distance, the distinctive shapes of markers and crosses could be surmised. The Puritan nodded and altered his course off the main path and towards the object of his dark curiosity. Tree branches cast scattered shadows over a solemn garden, and the transition from dawn's light to the dim calm of the grave required a moment's adjustment of vision. But even one not as steeped in the horrors of evil as the Puritan was, could plainly see that some soul, recently interred, had been recently disturbed. The Puritan knelt beside the roughly strewn hole in the earth, and it were only then that Rhodes understood the soil of the grave had not been removed from above, but rather clawed away from below. "Saints above!" Rhodes exclaimed. "What madness is this?" The Puritan responded flatly, still examining the atrocity. "The site of a dark ritual, a resurrection of a kind, but one most unholy." Peering around the edge of the hole, the Puritan plucked a sprig of something that had not grown there, but had been placed there. "Wolfsbane," he muttered knowingly, and then stooped to the earth itself, breathing in deeply an expected, but no less repellent, stench. "And soured eggs. I am familiar with such concoctions for rituals such as these, though I am thankfully unaware of their mechanisms." The Puritan pointed to the stone grave marker, then looked to Rhodes. "Is this name of significance?" Rhodes moved his eyes away from the harrowing hole in the ground and nodded in sad recognition. "Aye, Nicholas Bullock, buried not 2 days ago, thrown from his horse. I'd heard of its happening, but were not present for the funeral since I were..." Rhodes trailed off, ashamed now of how his sinful vices had so overcome his common humanity. The Puritan said nothing to it, but stood with an iron assurance. "Lain but 2 days, and my quarry arrives only yesterday at best, knowing full well of a fresh death with which he could raise a spawn of hell. Indeed, he had help here, someone to relay such knowledge. Is there kin left to this Bullock?" Rhodes nodded. "I'll take you there." Rereading it, it's so awkward in places, isn't it? Chapter 4, A Town's Folk. As they made their way the short distance to the village, Rhodes asked the Puritan for a cautious indulgence. "When we arrive, please let me be the one to talk to any of my neighbors, at least at first. You'll take their measure, I am sure, but we are all here fairly unused to strangers, and I would be more likely to convince them to converse on such sensitive matters." The Puritan shrugged. As you wish, but if I have a question, I will press it. Rhodes actually smiled in relief, a small victory against the monolith that was the man's presence. And with this preamble, Rhodes deigned to press slightly further. And how might I introduce you then, sir? You shall introduce me with the truth, that I am but a pilgrim. Nothing more than that? The Puritan halted suddenly, so much so that Rhodes stutter-stepped to prevent himself from colliding with the man's back. The Puritan then turned, with a rare expression that was almost like fatherly concern. With sincere eyes and a knowing tone, he opened slightly wider the door upon the new reality Rhodes found himself in. Names are a powerful tool in the devil's arsenal. To know a name gives you power over a thing, or a person. Thus you would be wise to give your name out sparingly, if at all, when witchcraft is about. And so I am simply a pilgrim, a wanderer in the Lord's service. Rhodes took this in without comment, and they proceeded in silence down to Dolbarrow. A snug collection of 22 distinct buildings comprised of homes, a smithy, and a small inn. Dolbarrow was as far and away envisaged from anywhere that true evil might be thought to dwell. Josiah Rhodes had been born here, and what he told the Puritan were true. He knew every family, nook, and cranny of the place, and so it was that the true terror of the new truths he had beheld the night prior finally settled upon him as he looked upon the place of his birth with trusting eyes, wrought now with newfound suspicions. Proceeding towards Dolbarrow's center, Rhodes gave polite greetings to those neighbors already active in the early light of dawn, while the Puritan remained ever neutral in countenance, but always assessing each person with world-weary eyes. There were the plump and pleasant Appletons, Simon and Margaret, who, commensurate to their surname, were tending to the apple orchard that ran from the side of their home and into the fields aside the village. Then there was the formidably framed Gerard Crathon, whose gruff hammer strikes upon hot iron created the very rhythm of Dolbarrow's morning activity. And as well there was the widow Harrison, withered and grandmotherly, tending to her front garden of herbs, and who was always happy to give a wave to a familiar face. The rest of the populace was still rising for the day, or otherwise out of sight, and to Rhodes things looked as normal and as welcoming as they looked as normal and as welcoming as they had ever been. Yet unavoidable in its collateral effect, the aura of uncertainty radiating from the Puritan numbed all of it. Rhodes nodded to the inn ahead, whose brightly colored sign proudly proclaimed itself the Dole's Angel. There it is, held in the Bullock family for generations. Nicholas's brother Samuel is the keeper. I've not spoken to him in several days, but we are friendly enough. A question then occurred to Rhodes. If I may ask, sir, whatever gave you the inkling to come to this far part of the world, of all places, looking for your man? The Puritan grunted. The last word from the dying lips of his Parisian lackey was Dolbarrow. I was proceeding to this village last night when I encountered the necromancer and his pet heading away. Only by God's grace did I happen upon the diabolist where and when I did. A few moments besides, and I would still be on the hunt for him. Rhodes stopped then, suddenly enough that the Puritan followed suit, and Rhodes felt internally embarrassed that he had not made the realization earlier. And I am but a useful tool for you in the furtherance of this hunt. I who am of Dolbarrow. Without my help, your pursuit would be ended. The Puritan looked at Rhodes with something like pity, shaded with irritation. I use whatever and whomever the Lord puts before me to undertake my work, yes. But you are a convenience, not a necessity. An untested ally, possibly. I have been many a place entirely foreign to me, and adapted as needs be without guidance. But if you wish to go back to your hovel and your bottle, the Puritan swept out a guiding hand back in the direction of Rhodes's house. Then by all means. Otherwise, mayhaps you harbor care enough for your neighbors to ensure the safety of their lives and the security of their immortal souls? Rhodes stared into the Puritan's righteous condescension. Condescension? How about condescension, scribe? Good job. Righteous condescension, and sighed, more in self-recrimination than in defeat. No, I do not want that. It is just... Rhodes glanced around at the town, the people, the trees, the sky. I feel untethered to all things now since last night. The Puritan's gaze softened, at least as much as granite might soften for a harsh breeze, and hesitantly reached out and placed a hand on Rhodes's shoulder. Such knowledge is a burden willfully borne only by the rare few who deign to seek the darkness on behalf of the light. It is easy to turn away from it, deny it, live in a kind of false ignorance of it. Many have, and many more will do so. But mark me, Josiah Rhodes, if you choose to do so, you will never, never rest easy ever again. Rhodes took a breath, nodded a thanks to the Puritan, and led him into the Dole's Angel. The small pub within had been the village's gathering place for more years than could be recalled, owned by the family Bullock. "Hail, Samuel Bullock!" Rhodes called out with a smile tainted by apology. The man in question looked up from his labor, tending to the inn's small collection of spirits behind the well-traveled bar. Bullock, a portly man with a black head of hair and an impressive mustache, each giving way to the graying of older years, gave a nod to his neighbor, while his eyes warily settled on the Puritan, and then to Josiah's side. "Aye, Josiah. Good morrow." Rhodes stepped up to lean cordially against the bar. "And to you, Samuel. My condolences on the loss of Nicholas, and my apologies for having been absent from his ceremony." Bullock's visage remained neutral as he nodded a solemn thanks. Was a grim business, that. The man's pride, as Josiah well knew, would not permit him to say or dwell further on the subject, and accordingly, the innkeeper smoothly changed the subject. "Are you off to war, then?" Bullock motioned to the sheathed sword. Rhodes paused, having all but forgotten it was there, and decided that were he and the Puritan to make progress, he would need to relay the truth, though filtered by falsehood. "Of a kind, I am afraid. I was set upon the night past by a highwayman of some kind, and I was only saved, thanks be to God, by my newfound companion, who happened to be nearby. Sir—" Rhodes glanced back at the Puritan, who was himself now giving Rhodes an expectant look. "Walker." The Puritan's face did not falter, but in his eyes there was, perhaps, the barest passing of a sardonic appreciation. Rhodes re-engaged Bullock. "We've reason to think the brigand was not the only one of his kind about, and that there may still be a danger. Thus I was curious to know if you had perhaps seen such a stranger, or strangers with the look of trouble about them, in the past day or so." Bullock opened his mouth to speak, when Walker stepped forward, presenting something clutched between his wiry fingers, the scrap of the necromancer's robe, still stained with the sorcerer's blood, wiped from Walker's blade. "The thief of last night wore a garment such as this. Do you recall seeing such on any passerby of late?" Bullock leaned forward, giving the scrap of silk a curious assessment. "Cannot say I have seen such a thing worn by anyone here, but then I've not had a lodger for at least 3 days. All who visited since that were not neighbors. All who visited since that were not neighbors were mostly passing merchants with whom I have some familiarity, stopping in for a drink before leaving on their way to Wessex or northward." Walker assessed Bullock's response with eyes that knew of the lies that men can tell. "You loved your brother, yes?" Walker's tone was so accusatory and cold, Rhodes actually took a step back at the callous force of the interrogation. For his part, Bullock's face rose red with sudden anger, though his emotional self-discipline withheld an outright outburst. "What are ye meaning to imply, good sir?" Rhodes held up a cautious hand of both peace and apology, more in fear for Walker's safety at that moment, knowing as he did the hidden power in the portly bartender's arms for more than one brew-induced battle Rhodes had witnessed at the inn over the years. Walker gave a small shrug, his face betraying nothing to the insensitivity he presently embodied. "'Tis only a question, sir. I seek in my travels to ensure and preserve the immortal souls of all whom I encounter. To know that one was truly loved before their departure from this coil is to hold assurance in my own heart that such a one is nestled now in the bosom of our Father." The anger in Bullock's cheeks hovered for a heartbeat before beginning to recede, and with this reduction so too did the man's guard slip, and the edges of tears could be seen brimming in his eyes. But despite the uncharacteristic show of grief, Bullock's voice remained as sober as Rhodes had been before his fall from grace. "My brother and I had our disputes, as all brothers do, but indeed before his tragedy he knew that he was loved, even by one such as I." Walker kept the man's gaze clutched within his own, and then, with a nod of solemn certainty, backed away from his stern inquiry. I believe that he was, sir, and you have my condolences. After a few more polite pleasantries, the crusading pair exited the pub for the street in order to assess their next steps. If it were not the diabolism of brotherly care, then there remains someone in this village willing to use dark magics for their own perverted gain, Walker muttered. Rhodes's face expressed concerned credulence. Neither I nor my neighbors will abide a hunt for witches, Mr. Walker. Certainly the most of my fellows are good and God-fearing people, not given to humoring diabolism. If we, or rather you, are to make any further assertions, I implore you to do so with the most surpassing care. And that's where I left off. And I'm not sure where to take... Well, okay. So I already know what the solution is to this. I know who the culprit is, because as in most thinly veiled mystery stories, usually meet the culprit early on without knowing for sure who they are. But where do I go from here? Where do we go from here? Okay, well, the whole point of this is to just sit down and write something, so. All right, so we got our mystery solvers here. What happens next, and how do we keep the story going? They've talked to the innkeeper. They've talked to the next of kin of the body used for making the monster. Okay. Let's try this. The Puritan. I don't know if I can narrate everything exactly, so hopefully you can see the words that I'm typing on the screen there. Actually, how clear is that? It's fairly clear. So if I'm not narrating everything that I'm writing down, hopefully anybody watching this can follow along. Let's see. Oh, I wish I could play some music during this, but unfortunately I don't know if I can actually play anything with sound and not have it copyrighted. So, boy, this is going to be an exciting stream for somebody. This is why I have it on the alternate channel, because God knows it's not very exciting stuff for any Scribe Light fans. Hmm. Yeah, I understand. Silent stream, contemplative perhaps, but I don't think I can narrate everything. So I will back up and read what I've written. Let's see. Neither I nor my neighbors will abide a hunt for witches, Mr. Walker. Certainly, the most of my fellows are good and God-fearing people, not given to humoring diabolism. If we, or rather you, are to make any further assertions, I implore you to do so with the most surpassing care. The Puritan sighed in ill-veiled frustration. I am unconcerned with the nature of my reputation here, Rhodes, nor for the gentle temperaments of your fellows. Worry over me once more, and I'll bade you farewell, and you'll have only your worries to carry you along with this evil about. Now, give me leave to wander and think. The two made a grim parade down the main path of the town, the Puritan seeking evil, and Rhodes resigned to the effort at the expense of the peace that Dolbarrow had always represented. And in this procession, Rhodes could not help but to journey back to the far more bloody marches of his past and the broken men over whom he had held the fate of life and death. So many deaths. And of course, all of this is just drafting because, God knows at some point I'll come through this again like I am right now and edit it and revise it and so on. For all 5 of you still watching, I guess aside from myself, so thank you for sticking around. Truth be told, more of this is for me to give myself reason to write. It is so difficult to come up with the enthusiasm or inspiration sometimes with being locked in my apartment for as long as I am, having other distractions and so on. And I've had a real problem lately, as some of you probably already know from past streams or just me complaining about things before. I like to write. I really do. I find a lot of enjoyment in it. I like, leveraging my imagination into creating something out of nothing. But for those of you that might also be writers yourselves or have some experience with it, you might also know the agony of wanting to, but just, self-doubt, uncertainty about what you're going to do and so on. And I work so much better when it comes to things like this with having something pushing me forward. And so this is not the first experiment in that, but maybe an ongoing one. If I don't have somebody giving me a deadline, if I don't have an assignment from a teacher or something over my head, if I don't have somebody making a request of an ad that I write for them from a live stream or something, can I find a way to push myself to write more in the absence of an outside source? And so that's what I think this is. If I go live doing it, and there's at least the notion that someone's either watching this now or watching this in the future, I neither want to disappoint myself nor entirely disappoint whoever might be looking over my shoulder at it. So, in a way, I'm using you. Not in a vindictive way or a malicious way, but it's a confession. It's a confession that apparently I don't have it within me to just write of my own accord. I need some outside entity pushing me forward. And that is you, dear viewer, whether you're listening live or in the future. Because presumably, if this works, if I get something done of note today, then I'll do this again and again until I at least finish this story, wherever it's going. So there you go. There's some honesty from me on a Sunday morning. And I'll go for at least an hour or so at this, or if I feel the need to keep going here. All right. But how about giving? Yeah, my brain puts out words and then I have to go back and fix them later. Oh, the constant battle of the writer. Yeah, how about Earth? Hmm. Oh, what's a good first name for her dead husband? I don't know. What's a time period appropriate name? Let's see. This is what, the Middle Ages, technically, or the Renaissance? Yeah. I mean, technically, it's all over the place. It's very abstract. I'm not going to be trying to do any historically correct stuff here. Let's see. We already used Nicholas. How about Edmund? Edmund, that's a good one. Benedict Harrison. Edmund Harrison. Geoffrey. We already used Gerard. Thomas. That sounds firm enough. Using that name that I've given him, Walker, Texas Ranger. No, but anyway. Thomas is a great name. You have some personal bias there, Richo. Let's see. God. It's like, see, it is one of the problems. It's sort of like the curse of reverse engineering. Like, I know in my head who the guilty party is. I know how it's going to play out at the end. The question is, how do I get there and make it interesting, right? It's almost like it's a chore trying to figure out, like, well, I mean, I already know, so why bother doing like that kind of thing? And I guess part of my problem is I keep worrying. On the one hand, I'm worrying about what is my audience going to think? And then I have to also remember I don't have an audience. I mean, the only audience for this story is you guys. The only reason anybody knows the stories exists is because I've shown it in this, relatively public forum. Otherwise, I could be just writing it for myself, and that's what I should be doing. I should be writing it for myself, but I'm worrying like, oh, somebody's going to think this is stupid or whatever. It's like, well, I shouldn't care about that, right? Like in my head, I should write it at perfection the first time through. It should be a wholly formed and complete object the first time my fingertips hit the keyboard. Except it can't. It won't be. And somehow that admission feels like a failure. Anyway. W.R. Carlson, ever hear of a YouTuber, Scribelight? I heard that he's evil and that he has a second channel. You should check him out. I've never heard of him before. What am I talking about? I'm non-author dark. And non-author might be sort of a self-imposed recrimination there. Okay. No, I can't do this here. I gotta. Nope. Too quick. Too quick, too early. And of course, in that thought, it's like, okay, well, now time to take a break. Take a break from what? You haven't done anything. You've gotten yourself, what? Half a page? Not even that? No, it's not time to take a break. Let's back up a bit. Actually, in order to make this work, I have to change the geography of events. So what do I mean by that? Well, since they're walking out of the town, and this might give some spoilers away, but then again, at this point, I don't really care. Let's see. Where did we start? No. There we go. Okay, so we have to change the geography of the people in the town. I have to put the widow Harrison at the front of their entrance into the town, not after the Appletons. Okay, let's see. So there was... Okay, so we take her and we put her up here. And then if this is appropriate paragraph breaking. Okay. There we go. Okay, now what's the reason for that? Well, I'll give it away here. Someone who isn't the widow Harrison is the guilty party. Okay, so if I have him spot the Wolvesbane at that point and have a suspect in his mind, then it makes sense to then leave the town, wait until nightfall, come back, and observe what's her name. But doing that means I've subtracted any further interactions necessary or that make sense at that point with the other people in the town. And since the widow Harrison is not the perpetrator, I rob myself of the ability of having further interactions between our characters and the other people in town before he spots the Wolfsbane and we get our red herring. So if I put the widow at the front of the town rather than inside the town, he won't spot the Wolfsbane until later and we can meet the other people. That was the rationale right there. So I will take this part right here and save it for later, if you get my meaning. Save it for later. Okay, so it went the widow, the Appletons, and then Crathen, the blacksmith. So he would be the next one that they would run into walking out of the town. Oh, God. And sorry, if I'm moaning and groaning over here, it's because I've done something to my shoulder blade. I don't know what I slept on it wrong or something, so it's very, very sore. It hurts to move. I'm having a bit of a monkey moment, I suppose. Oh, God. How many people are actually watching right now? Still 5? You're hanging on? Oh, boy. All right. If the number had been 0, I might have found myself an excuse to stop, but okay. When did I start this now? Been almost going an hour. I got to at least get an hour in, if nothing else. Of course, most of that was reading the story, so. All right, now you're just stalling. Come on. Crathorn? I can't remember exactly how I spelled it. Yes. Yeah. Crathen, not Crathorn. Crathen. That's right. Okay. Continuity. It's important. so tough. Yeah, you guys are witnessing sort of like a internal personal crisis here. Because part of the problem is as I'm writing this, and even though in my rational mind, this is just a draft, this is not the final result. You'll be revising this over and over again in the future. Just get something out. Again, that notion in my head that I'm writing it out and it sounds so poor or so cheesy or something else just keeps drilling into my conscience. And I'm just like, oh my God, just give up. You suck, right? Just, you suck. Stop it. Having a mental breakdown here. Not really, but you know what I mean. What do you call that? He's not in a barn. Approach him in his. Oh, what would you call that? No, shack sounds too insulting, sort of. Workshop? I don't know. Is there a good word for like that outdoor little place? I'm sure there's a word for it, a good word for it that I'm not thinking of right now. And even in that, it's like, oh, I can't even think of a good word. I'll say enclosure for now. I'm going to think of anything else. Hey, Johnny Hellcat, you're just in time for the most unexciting stream I think I've ever done, with the least amount of talking and just a lot of typing noises. Oh, excuse me. Now, here's where I'd want to know something about actual blacksmithing, because while I'm not ever intending to give too many specifics about either main character's backgrounds more than I already have, basically, the idea that this Walker character has, seen a lot of the world, done a lot of things, knows a lot of things, I want to exemplify that in some of his sort of offhanded mentionings of stuff. And so him being able to examine the blacksmith's work and make comment on it or his style or something in a knowledgeable way would indicate something of the guy's history without, coming out and telling us. But the thing is, I know nothing about blacksmithing except what I could sort of make up. And of course, yeah, this whole thing's made up. I understand that. But, it'd be nice to put some stuff in there that actually makes sense. So that requires some research. Oh, boy. Oh, the standards I hold myself to on these things. Dang it. Yeah, barely a page worth of stuff. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, guys. I think I'm done for now. I read the thing through, got to a point where I left off, and now I don't know. I hit a block where it's like I want to continue. I should write in pieces. I should write something else. No. Writer's block has won the day on this one, so I'll mark this part off for use later or something. Yeah, not the most exciting stream, guys. Apologize. Not exactly a TEDx or anything more interesting than that. I don't know that I'll do anything else today as far as live streams. I was intending to take Sunday off for the most part. But for those of you who are here and care, the next live stream I'll do is probably going to be tomorrow with Kurt Metzger doing a TED Excellence over on my other channel, my Scribe Light channel. The clever reverse of the name of this channel, because that's what it was meant to do. Even though this channel was technically started specifically to talk about BDSM, which you can find in this channel's archives, such as it were. And for those of you that are, the rare few who are subscribed to this channel as well as my main channel, who might get notifications of such things. Yeah, I think I'm going to call it there. And internally into myself, call it a mild defeat. But that's as much as I could get done trying to focus on writing for a bit. So anyway, everyone, those of you who joined, anybody who happens to listen or watch this in the future, as there's not much to listen to, thank you for taking the time. Hopefully I'll find a reason to keep poking away at this. I'm so disappointed in myself right now. Hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. Talk to you later.